Welcome to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, where we help business leaders and individual contributors with actionable insights to hit their number and figure out the nuances of truly operating a business globally today, squeezing the essence of the lessons learned from the planet's top tech leaders. This is your guide to joining the fast track to global market scaling.
So on today's show, we welcome Yogesh Shetty. Yogesh is the founder and CEO of Avibra, a mission-driven wellness platform that makes low-cost, no-benefit, accessible to everybody, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Shetty, despite growing up in slums of Mumbai, rose through executive ranks in the US to lead technological innovation at both JP Morgan Chase and New York Life. Shetty's deep understanding of finance and insurance, coupled with his empathetic heart, motivate him to give back to society, something we're all lacking today, I think, and democratizing benefits in the US. So I'm very excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ross. It's a privilege to be part of your show.
Thank you for your kind words. Well, look, in terms of your background, Mumbai is a city I've had the great pleasure of visiting on a couple of occasions on various projects I've been involved with. But, tell us, step by step, if you would, some of your background, what brought you to where you are now, because it sounds like a hell of a journey to the mission you're on now today. If you could share with our audience, please.
Yeah, it has been one hell of a journey. So to give you background, I'm born and brought up in Mumbai.
Mm-hmm.
I was born and brought up in an extreme poverty situation, being raised single-handedly by my mother. And what it instilled me is at a very young age to do something different. I think one of the thing which I truly believe in life is there are certain things you cannot control, who you are, where you're born, completely outside your control. But there are certain aspects of the life which you can completely control and you can mold it the way you want it. So the fact that I was born poor, I didn't have the best of the tools, I would say education and any of those accessible to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I truly believe that you can mold your life if you really want to, which comes with a lot of factors, right? Which is hard work, passion, focus, patience, which is all given. And so if you look at my journey, what happened is after high school, I would say technically after age 15, I was basically pushed into the workforce. Even though I was A+ student, but I didn't have the privilege of pursuing a higher education, which could be engineering or any of those higher education that would set a very good career path. And so at the age of 15, I started working, and I was really passionate about computers. I was an A+ student, and I was really good in academics. And at that time, I pretty much studied most of the kind of a self-taught, self-learned. And it was one of those dot-com boom era, like 98, I would say.
Sure.
And at that time, pretty much there was a global transformation happening, which we have witnessed last 1 year as part of the pandemic, a complete digital transformation. But 98 was one of those era which was witnessing I would say, the first tranche of digital transformation, which is sort of an inflection point for most of the technologies which we are still using, which was the internet era. And at that time, pretty much I learned everything by myself, like reading a lot of books. And then I started approaching a lot of startup companies in Mumbai, because the big firms will not even, I tried getting into a couple of big firms and everyone told me, go back to school and study,
Yeah.
So the only option that was remaining for me was a startup companies. And I worked for a couple of startups. Then I got my first break at a very young startup, which was really at their inception stage, called Financial Technology. And I was the early employee over there. And it was we were all cramped up in a small office. You can imagine it's more of a garage kind of a thing in a Silicon Valley, but in India, it was a very small 1-bedroom kind of I would say apartment, and everyone was cramped in that. So that was I would say a breakthrough moment for me, because being an early employee, I got a chance to work very closely with the founders of the company, and I've drawn a lot of good attributes, I would say, from them. They also gave me a ton of opportunities to unleash my true potential, and that we grew. I'm assuming like we grew from when I joined, I was like 15th employee, and then we grew from 15 to almost 1,000 now in a span.
Wow.
And we captured, I believe, at that time, at 80% of the market share also in a span of 5 years. That was basically we were building a Bloomberg terminal for Indian stock market,
Okay.
and it was a very novel concept in India at that time.
Sure.
And so I was part of the rocket ship. So I've seen a startup. Like I was the head of engineering, and I was tasked with a lot of responsibilities. So that gave me a very broad exposure that includes leadership, management, engineering. I was also tasked with one of the most challenging problem you can think in terms of solving and bringing products to the market. So those exposure really were, I would say, the foundational part of my professional journey. And at the age of 23, the same company sent me to US. I came over here. I joined JP Morgan Chase. I directly worked for high frequency trading desk. Then I wrote a book, which is basically how to build, I would say, trading systems for capital market. And afterwards, I joined Lehman Brothers. Again, I was a vice president over there, got me a really good exposure around capital market itself. And again, I was part of that entire Lehman era, Lehman bust, and I was part of the transition to Barclay. And then I moved to New York Life from there. New York Life was an interesting journey for me, given that I joined that capital market group, not an insurance. So I have been a capital market domain expert right from day one. And when I joined New York Life, again, I joined the investment arm. But there came an opportunity, and I was quickly promoted over there. In a span of 8 years, I became one of the youngest managing director in the company. And during those sort of a career development, I got an opportunity to be on the insurance side. So I did very well on the investment, and the senior management gave me an offer saying that, why don't you come on the insurance side? And I was like, why would I go on the insurance side? But this was again a change for me. Hey, let's learn this new domain. And but within like 3 years of the insurance understanding, gave me a complete view of the entire insurance business, which includes how can you start an insurance business from scratch. And that was, I would say, an impetus for me to spin up my own startup, because I quickly realized that insurance is one of those domains which has not been touched or not been transformed, unlike fintech. It's at the early stage of that digital transformation, whereas fintech, if you see the actual revolution started in, I would say, 2005 or 2000, after 2008, right, has been a massive innovation and transformation in that sector. Same with insurance. So I think that was a great moment for me that, hey, this is the right time. And the great thing about working with incumbents is incumbents, like most of the incumbents will never take a risk, or they will never do anything which will disturb their existing business model, which has been around for many decades. So this was a great opportunity for me to come on the other side of the table. So I quit my high-flying career, I would say, and came on the other side of the table and completely starting from scratch all over again.
Wow, that's brave. That's very, very brave. So it's clear to me that, your journey was very about high pressure environments, pressure cooker, boiler room, whatever you want to call it. What gap did you see, and what drove you to make that shift? Really, I'm kind of curious to know, like you said, why would I go into insurance? It sounds like it was more the same. Like what drove you to make that decision? Because it's a big one.
Yeah, the interesting thing about insurance, I'm not saying that insurance as a financial asset, it's a very noble asset. if you compare with other financial product. Now, what does it mean? That's a very noble asset, right? You pick any products. Let's start with life insurance, the most noblest asset, because life insurance is a product which guarantees some payment to your loved ones when you're not around. Now, when you're not around, it's a very big trust thing, right? Like no one is watching you, and the company is supposed to give some lump sum so that people don't go bankrupt, or or it is meant to help their loved ones either to stay at their current home or to give a better education to their children. So it's a very, very noble thing, right? That's like the life insurance side. If you pick up home insurance and auto insurance also, right? You're in the risk mitigation business, or risk, I would say. Again, a very noble thing, right? Because the financial asset triggers when a human or an individual is at the very lowest state of their emotion. Now, that could be your house got burned down, you had some major catastrophe events, and not most of the people live paycheck to paycheck. And at that time, the insurance product triggers and comes in a form of an angel. It's kind of an angel insurance, honestly, and tells an individual that, hey, don't worry, I'm here and I will cover up all your losses. So it's very emotionally attached compared to, let's say, a banking product, right? If you pick up a banking product, of course, banking is a store of a value just to store your money and to facilitate transaction.
Yep.
It doesn't trigger an emotional, I would say, gratification. It's a sort of a day in, day out for you. Whereas insurance, as I told you, it comes in a form of an angel for you at your worst moment of your life, when no one is around you to help you. And that's how the asset gets triggered. And it tells you that, hey, here I am, and I can help you out from the situation. And I can get you back I can restore your state of life and give you that peace of mind, that is a very emotional thing. And that's why I was very fascinated with it, because if you look at the capital market in general, I was always on the stock market, derivatives market, which are mainly speculative, right? It's people like, hey, again, people look from a retirement perspective, speculative trading perspective. But insurance is overall, I feel like it's a very noble asset.
And what was it you saw as a gap in the market that led you to do what you're doing now? Why is that such a passion of yours?
Yeah, one is it's like this, right? If I have been privileged in my entire sort of life, given the odds of me being successful is very, very low, given the path I have taken so far. So this was a moment for me in my life that I keep an idea journal. I have like around close to 400 plus or 500, I would say close to 500 right now. Ideas, where I keep logging them. Okay, how can you? Because there are so many issues in this world that there are a lot of solutions you can roll out, to fix the problem. And one of the option was for me was, if I'm going to give my next 10 years of my life, I need to pick up something which will change the society and which will have a greater impact to people and the community also. So that was the first sort of a criteria for me, and insurance is definitely one of them. The second thing is, when I looked at the insurance, as I mentioned to you, insurance is one of those domains which is almost at the starting phase of transformation. So you're at the right moment, and you're at the right sort of a place to introduce very novel ideas, which is very fresh in people's mind, and that was the second opportunity. And third is, insurance in general, I would say, is a very highly complex industry, and it doesn't mean that, hey, in order to do some radical innovation, you need to have some insider information, some insider ideas on how you could structure, that business model. Even if you're creating a new business model, how would you structure it? How would you navigate the rules and regulations? So that was, I think that is one of the, I would say, the strongest aspect of that. And the fourth is, the other light bulb moment for me was when I looked at I think as Jeff Bezos once said, right, your margin is an opportunity for an innovation. This exactly goes into the insurance industry. That there has been a lot of, I would say, advertising spend. And I think it's close to $168 billion if you do the math, in terms of annual, I would say, expense towards advertising, distribution. And if you look at GoFundMe.com, and one of the biggest campaign at any moment of time is always funeral expenses. People
Wow.
asking for 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. We're talking about a customer segment which is less than 100K household income in the US. We're not talking about the upper middle class and the rich class. So GoFundMe, as you can see, is the other a real sort of example of how some of the problems we have. And the question that always comes is, why cannot people buy a 10,000 or 15,000 insurance to cover their loved ones? When people can spend $4 Starbucks coffee on a daily basis, or even a Dunkin' Donuts $2, example, why can't you simply buy a product like that?
Mm.
And that was sort of a triggering moment. And one of the math I sort of did is, hey, even if you want to, so let's say, offer as a benefit to an individual, it's not going to cost that much, for an industry. But of course, it's a very novel concept. And how do you do it? That's where the crux of this entire path has been for me, is how do you make it available to the masses in such a way that people value it and people appreciate it. So these are the factors I would say that went in sort of picking up this path. And I think it comes, I think in a nutshell, it comes to what can you do where you create an impactful, I would say, create an impact for the society and for the community first.
I think you've picked up on something that I see every day of the week as a trait to success. It's actually the little things done well that will make a success of you, not the big things done once. And what I mean by that is, if you can think about perfecting a daily routine and having good habits on a regular basis, you're breeding a habit of success, and you're leading to a longer term, I suppose, lucrative, spiritually and financially richer future. So if you can, I suppose the analogy I often use is, Will Smith was once asked by his father, him and his brother were asked, go and build a brick wall. And they said, we don't know how to build a brick wall. And all they did was they said, right, let's focus on one brick at a time. And let's make, and I know this inherently well at the moment because I'm building a shed in my backyard, my back garden, as we'd say. Right now, my wife will tell you how perfectionist I am around each brick. And it's millimeter perfect. I had it checked by a builder. But the point is that you build each one perfectly. And it's only when you stand back and look at it, you're like, okay, now that makes sense. I can see it clearly. Whereas if you make a mistake with one and you're perpetuating that mistake, it has a knock-on effect. And I think human beings are the same. And what you mentioned there about, putting a couple of bucks away that you spend in Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts actually can have an impact for later. And I think that's absolutely key. And I think that's true of good behavior and habits and exercise and all those sorts of things as well. And I'm curious to know, is that a trait that helped you get out of your situation? You mentioned a little bit earlier that the odds of success for you growing up were very, very low. Like, I want to know why you beat the odds. I want to know, like, you mentioned a thing there, which I loved. You mentioned success journal, and here's mine right here. I have a journal here on my desk. And I'm actually reading an absolutely fantastic book at the moment called The Game Changer Formula, which is about planning and methodologies for, scoping out your future. But tell me about, like, your belief systems around daily habits, and what led you to get out of the situation where you were in, and how you could help others do so as well.
Yeah, that's a great sort of a question. I think the first credit goes to my mom.
Amazing.
So I think without her sacrifice, there is no way that, because you need, I think every aspect of life, you need that supporting foundation. And I think my mother was definitely, I think whatever I am today is because of that foundation been given by her. But at later point of my life, I would say people, because if most of the times when I read a lot, and when a lot of people say that success is because of this, that, but end of the day, success is because of someone helped you. It's end of the day, it's all boils down to people, because there is no way in this world you can succeed if you don't have the support of, I would say, people pushing you up. What it means is hard work, patience, discipline, integrity.
Yeah.
It's all given because we are born with that traits, And the question is, which I always say, is intelligence equally distributed? Opportunities are not, and people are the one which gives that opportunities, right? So, so I think the success of my life has always been about the people around me, and I have been very fortunate, even now as I'm running my company, that I always had great people around me, which they kept pushing me in the upwards, which automatically pushed them also, but in a way that sort of helped me further succeed in my path. So when we say luck, I think luck is directly attributed to people. It has nothing. My philosophy is it has nothing to do with patience, hard work, because those are the traits we as a human are born with.
Interesting.
It is people end of the day. So that's one, and the people come in various forms and fashion, right? It could be your parents, which by default everyone have a good, like some may be unfortunate where they don't get a good parenting foundation. But in my case, my mother was the first person, I would say, who pushed me. And in second aspect of my life, it was the company I worked for, the founders, the people over there, that includes my managers, everyone, the supervisor. They kept pushing me. Again, when I came to JP Morgan, as you can see, every aspect of my life, it has been always the people. So luck to me is people, and I think this is a very important thing which I think everyone should understand. I think we live in a world, everyone has a very short lifespan. If we can push each other, not downwards, upwards, we as a world will come out to be a very, very far superior being, I would say, in this planet. And that is not true in most of the cases right now, right? There is a certain section of, I would say, we would see where people tend to push downwards. But we as a community, we are born to push people upwards. We are born with some natural traits. So I think that's the secret of my success, I would say. The second is definitely patience, hard work, discipline. I think as soon as if people have faith in you, and if they demonstrate that you can do it, and we will help you in that path, all those traits automatically gets activated for an individual. So that is a very key part, right? If someone comes to you, Ross, and he tells you that, okay, you're doing your backyard right now. Someone comes and tell you that I'm an expert in this space, just go ahead and do it single-handedly, but I'll make sure everything is, I'll oversee all your tasks. Even though you may not be a perfect handyman, but all those traits of a handyman will automatically get activated in you.
I agree.
And you will get to the finish line, with that person's help. So that's what it is, end of the day. Even now, when I run my company, I have a really, really strong team, leadership team and the core team. And as an individual, I'm a very ordinary being, but when my team is around with me, they make me invincible, So that's what it is, end of the day.
I love that answer. And I think it also speaks to your humility, because you're obviously a very humble guy. You're also, very supportive of your team. And I would be very much the same as that. I'm always looking to hire people who are smarter than me, people who are hardworking. You're not here to motivate people. You're here to hire motivated people. And I think that's really true. You have to assume they can do the job, but they want to do the job. But also your job is to be the visionary, is to direct as a director. One thing I want to ask you is around opportunity, because you talked about intelligence being equally distributed, but opportunities not being equally distributed, and I think that's true. I would support that, but I would also add to it, and I would say that I think opportunities disguise themselves as hard work, as obscured, difficult problems. And I'm keen to know what your thoughts are on that, because I do believe it takes a certain type of human being to recognize an opportunity, and I believe that fortune also favors the prepared mind. But you have to be given the ability to have a prepared mind and know what that looks like. What are your thoughts around opportunity being disguised in plain sight?
Got it. No, that's a great question. I think the first thing we everyone has to sort of outline is, imagine, right? If given that your lifespan is, let's say, 60 to 80 years, the first thing you need to carve out is what is your purpose in life, and that is how you can carve out, I would say, a plan, and that also determines your appetite for risk.
Yeah.
There are people who are happy. I would say, again, the definition of happy is very different, right? There are people who are like, no, my purpose is this, and this is my risk appetite. So the opportunities I have got to unlock that state of whatever the happiness or the peace of mind is enough for me. So that means I won't take much risk. I think that's what it is, right? End of the day. It's not
Yeah.
like everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, everyone wants to be a scientist, everyone wants to be an astronaut.
Agreed.
It's your, I think the first is purpose. The larger the purpose, the you will have to look out for a much bigger opportunity. That's how it is. If your purpose is very small, you will try to harvest, I would say, the opportunities which could be in a small scale fashion, and you will be happy with that. At the end of the day, we need to make sure that people there are people who are still living miserably in spite of having everything in life from a materialistic point of view, right?
Sure.
So it's the same thing as what is your purpose? And I think if your purpose is higher, a very high purpose that needs a greater opportunity, because in a way, I feel like we live in a world, and the opportunities is given by the, I would say, universe, or
Hmm.
maybe I would say society. If I go back to the society and say that this is my purpose, society will say, okay, here are 5 big opportunities, but in order to tap into those opportunities, you need to take this following risk. Are you willing to do it? And if you say, yes, I'm willing to take that risk, then rewards in the end would be higher. And there is also a risk. There may not be any reward. Now, again, depends upon what you mean by reward, right? Either it's financially reward, or it's just a satisfaction that you gave your best, and in the end, things don't work out. So purpose is important, because if you don't have a purpose, I think specifically in case of entrepreneurship, right, it's a very tough path. I think there is a well-known saying that entrepreneurship is like chewing glasses and tasting your own blood, and that is very true, right? Because the purpose of every entrepreneur is to make this world a better place, is to give a future generation a very different platform, a very different mental model. And in order to, if you go back and ask to the universe that this is what I want to do, universe will say that this is a very big thing which you are trying to achieve. That means the opportunities would be very big, and the risk would also be very high. So purpose is super important, because if you don't have a purpose, the path of entrepreneurship is it's lots of ups and downs. You would quickly give up. And it is also important that the purpose has to be tied with, I would say, an impact to the society and an impact to the world, because it cannot be monetarily tied. Because if you're tying with monetary rewards, then you would give up very soon, And as long as I would say, if you're thinking about the people, the society, you will get there. You will get there in some form or fashion. It may not be the path which you have outlined. Maybe universe may have outlined a much better path for you. to get to that final destination. And that may come as a surprise to you that, hey, this is the path I outlined to achieve this purpose through this model. But the end result was so different and it's so much better than what a person has planned.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think that's exactly right. And I think you need to have the presence of mind to be able to recognize that. What do you think it is within human beings that makes them entrepreneurs? What drove you to find Avibra, to found Avibra, and what gap did you see there? Like, why are certain people wired a certain way in your mind?
Yeah, I think wiring and recalibration is a continuous process, right? I think if you're wired like X after few events and experience in your life, you could be wired as Y. A great example is Lord Gautam Buddha, right? He was born as a prince. He had everything in life, so he was wired as X. But just that one experience where he went out and he saw a beggar in the street, his mind completely changed from X to Y. So that's a great example, right? I think we as a human we are trained to rewire continuously. We are trained for change. We are not trained to stay in one comfort zone forever. The interesting thing about entrepreneurship is, as I told you, purpose and the experience. That is super important. With me, if I take my personal experience over here, I was born and brought up in a poverty. That means I have lived a life of what it feels to be poor, And it's an amazing thing because I'll share an experience with you.
Mm-hmm.
When I first came to US, and the place where I was born and brought up, and I went to ShopRite for the first time. And as soon as I went to the dairy section, I saw 10 different types of milk, 10 different types of cheese. My brain got confused what to eat, and then finally my brain gave up, So as you can imagine, coming from a world, you see that coming from a world of, I would say, scarcity to a world of abundance. That is how the brain gets rewired automatically. Because if you go to the world of scarcity, brain is wired, hey, live in a very survival mode, be resourceful, be creative, be very tactical in terms of the approach you take, because you have to survive one day at a time, Whereas the same brain gets transported to a different world, gets rewired as Y, and then kind of gets confused and give up finally, right? That means you're willing to live without food for a short period of time. So what it means is purpose and experience, because in my case, I had the experience of living poor. When people raise money in GoFundMe.com, I had that experience also, because when my father passed away, my mother has to beg money, from people for funeral expenses. So I had a purpose, I had an experience, and then you figured out the business model. The business model is it's not going to cost that much, to give away 10,000, 15,000 insurance, example over here, as a benefit, as part of the much larger benefit, I would say. And you can still make it work. I think we live in a world right now where every business is making, I would say, Facebook, Google, the richest firm, right? Because as you can see, most of the startup companies, 50% of their lifetime value first goes to Facebook and Google. And the remaining 50% you have to monetize over a period of time. So imagine if instead of going to Google and Facebook, that 50% of the lifetime value goes to the community itself, to the people's pocket itself, in form of a very unique benefits. That has a very, very big impact,
I was interested with what you said there about having, the experience piece, and growing up in a situation, I think, where you inherently appreciate what you have a lot more now. And one of the interesting statistics that I have is that 70% of US millionaires are first-time millionaires. And Robert Kiyosaki of Rich Dad Poor Dad fame often talks about a paycheck being an addiction. and that it's one of the worst things an entrepreneur can possibly have. Um, what do you look for when you're hiring folks? Like, how do you? Because I think that entitlement is one of the most dangerous things in our society. And I've seen folks work really hard and be successful. And I've also seen a lot of folks be given everything, throw it away. And I've also seen a lot of people being given everything and just sit in mediocrity. What, and that comes down to the person. And I can't explain. And I think maybe it's experiential as well. I think in terms of how they decide to react to things. But like when you're hiring people and you're looking for people, and you mentioned earlier how people are a key part of what you do.
Sure.
What traits are you looking for? What are the really must-haves, and what are the red flags for you in your culture as you're setting the tone for your organization?
Yeah. So the first thing is, as an entrepreneur, and I would say as a CEO, you need to have a good assessment of organization strength and weakness, including, I would say, including myself over here. And I think every CEO will do a similar thing in order to set up the company for a much larger success, because that is super important. You need to do a self-reflection of yourself, a self-reflection of the organization. What are the strength and weakness you have? And I think in my case, I want to make sure that I hire someone who is 10x much better than what I do in their domain, whether it's sales, whether it's product, whether it's marketing, whether it's engineering. That is absolutely key, because if you don't do a self-reflection of who you are and what are your strength and weakness, there is no way you can build a very strong, I would say, a team. So that is super important. So that is one aspect which I kind of find everyone should do, in order to really build a success. Because end of the day, the success of the company is a reflection of people. It's not a reflection of a CEO. So in the end, those are the people who will push the company to a very new level. So that's the first, is hiring someone who is 10x better than me. The second is, I would say, again, purpose, because one is what we have done is we have hired people from, I would say, we have a very diversified team, people from all walks of life, people who have experienced of what it feels to be, I would say, underprivileged, where things have, during their childhood, things have not come easily. So I think that is again an important aspect, because as you mentioned, one of the interesting thing about a startup company is when you have surplus around you, you cannot innovate. There is no way innovation can happen.
Great saying. Love that. Yeah.
There is no way innovation can happen when you have a surplus. So it is very important that you take a perspective of frugal innovation as a startup. A frugal innovation means instead of hiring 3 people, maybe hire one, who is like pay them very well and make sure that they are equivalent to of the 3 brains, and they can sort of get things very, very creatively in a very resourceful manner. Also, that is super important. I think those are the, I would say, the trait, resourcefulness, kind of an grit, and those are, I would say, those are must have. The other thing which is I always look for is, I have this framework which I tend to apply to myself also, but to the team. It's called EPIC framework, EPIC.
Yeah.
So E stands for energy. You need to have a positive energy, because a positive energy means that the whatever ideas, whatever challenges you may have in life, you will have a solution, and you will have a very positive outlook towards any situation, because a startup is full of ups and downs, and you need to make sure that you don't lose your focus, specifically during the downtimes. So energy is super important. Energy is super important. The next is P, which is passion. If you're not passionate about anything, if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then it becomes a 9-to-5 job. We don't need a 9-to-5 people, The reason why it is and there is nothing wrong, because I know that a lot of people in this world are really not passionate about the work they do, but it is required. it is required to live a good life, which is fine, but in a startup, you need to make sure that people are really, really passionate about it. You like when you, I think we die every day when we go to sleep. So when you wake up the next day, the first thing that should come to your mind is, okay, what should I do next, to bring an impact, how do I keep innovating Avibra to make sure that it can have a very unique lens, it has a very unique catch. So you need to keep thinking about that is the first thought, and that is passion, right? You feel good, you feel motivated to get out of the bed. You don't need to keep an alarm, you don't need to keep snooze it 2 times, because that's what passion means. Hey, I need to get out of my bed, and I need to continue with my purpose, because 50% of your life you tend to spend at work, remaining 40% you tend to sleep, and the remaining 10% you tend to spend with your loved ones. That's what. So if 50% of your life is giving to work, you really need to be very passionate about it. The next is information. Information, what it means over here is you need to be a constant learner. You need to have a constant source of information where you're digesting it to keep recalibrating your end goal, because the world is changing so fast. The things around us are changing so fast that you need to keep abreast yourself. That's what information means. And it's very interesting, right? And I keep telling my folks also that I know people spend on an average, I believe, 2 to 3 hours Netflix on a daily basis. But if you spend even 30 minutes or even 1 hour, let's say 30 minutes of your day life into reading, you become a 0.0001% of the top echelon population. You can imagine that you are one of the top in a 7 billion of a population. You are 0.001% of that population, where you are one of the most smartest person in this planet. And you can use that information to mold and shape the world the way you want, So that's only 30 minutes of investment of your time in reading. So that's information. And the final one is compassionate. So EPIC, EPIC, so the last one is compassionate. Whatever you do, you need to be really compassionate about the people, because in the end, if you're not compassionate, if profit is your sole purpose, you will never succeed. Because and I think that means you need to bring impact. You need to achieve win people's trust and loyalty. You need to deliver services which will have a true impact to people's day-to-day life. So that's what's compassionate is. So this is like the 4 things. It's like a framework I tend to follow, and I tend to sort of see in my people also when I hire. And if everyone sort of tick marks those attributes, I'm pretty sure that person will succeed, and if that person succeeds, definitely the company will also succeed.
I love that. That is a great definition for leadership right there. And I think if you what you said there is if profit is your sole purpose, you won't be successful. And I agree with that. And with surplus, there's no innovation. I totally agree with that. So I suppose as we round the corner here and wrap things up, I'm curious to know what tips you have for our audience around hacking time. We had this recently on an episode where, I'm a big believer in organization. I'm a big believer in, you take time to make time. I'm get up at 5:30 a.m. I believe in, getting stuck in earlier sometimes to my day and getting a head start ahead of people. As a lot of my guests have, I believe in having a calendar that's very disciplined, and if it's not in there, it doesn't exist, and that kind of thing. And that allows me to spend time with my children, pick them up in the middle of the day and bring them to school and collect them from school and all that kind of stuff. What are your kind of major hacks? And maybe do you have a gizmo or a gadget that facilitates your life that, it's a low cost thing, but it's hugely valuable in terms of its delivery, if you could share with our audience?
No, that's a great question, Ross. I don't have any hack. I honestly don't use any tools also. It's amazing, right? as you can see, human brain is very organized in a linear fashion. We are supposed to, we're not a multitasking as a sort of a brain as an organ is not designed for a multitasking, right? It's very linear. And that's a caveat. I wish there was some way where you could have made a brain as a multitask. Then pretty much, I think there are a few species I've heard that which human doesn't have. I forgot whether it's a dolphin or I forgot, but it's a great book called Sleep. And I think they have mentioned that there are species when they sleep, half of their brain is still active and they can still perform, and the remaining half of the brain is in a sleep mode and sort of regenerating. I wish human were wired like that. But the time hack, I think it's all priorities, in the end. And I'm pretty sure people can clearly outline their priorities in life. First is, of course, their family. Second is, let's say, work. Then the third bucket is where you will need to give and take. Do you want to watch 2 hours of Netflix on a daily basis, or you want to watch 1 hour of Netflix and the remaining 1 hour you can devote to activities like reading, or could be personal growth, could be professional growth, So I would say at the end of the day, it boils down to those things. Or you want to spend 1 hour in Facebook, or you want to spend 15 minutes in Facebook and remaining 45 minutes with things. So I think the third bucket is where you have a lot of flexibility. When people say that I don't have a time, I think it's just an excuse. You always have time. You always have a time. It's just a question of how you want to prioritize it. There are certain things where no one should compromise, which I would say first is family, friends, because we as a human are not born to work hard. We are born to socialize. We are born to spread happiness. We are born to spread joy. We are born to shoulder each other at the time of crisis. So definitely those things are super important. I think that's where you should not never compromise. So like in my case, Saturday, Sunday, I never send an email to my team members on Saturday, Sunday. The reason is I know that if I send an email to my team members, they will get in a sort of a work mode. So that's one of the discipline which I have instilled, that weekends, no emails from at least from me, because that's how even the culture has been set, right? Because culture is a reflection of, I would say, leaders in the organization, right?
Totally.
And culture is also one of those things where you can be great in outlining all the values on a paper, but end of the day, culture is how people do their day-to-day job when no one is watching them around.
Totally.
How do they make their decision, when no one is watching them, no one is supervising them? How do they, I would say, build trust with each other? How do they handle, I would say, micro problems, because as a leadership team, as a CEO, you tend to handle the major problems, but there are so many micro problems that happens in the organization. So though that is what culture truly is, and that can only happen, and it's a reflection of people at the, I would say, the leadership level. And I think regardless of how great job you do in documenting those traits, but end of the day, you will have to make sure that people follow it when no one is watching, and that is the crux. And that the leadership team is the first, I would say, the role models,
of course,
to implement certain things and practices that automatically gets inherited by the team members and in the organization also.
Couldn't agree more. You've made two excellent points there. I think leaders are readers, there's no doubt about it, and they set the tone for the organization in the way that they should carry themselves, because that's how people will behave when you're not around. And that's really, I've heard CEOs talk about that before. Culture is what matters when I'm not around. And I totally support that and agree. Well, look, I can't thank you enough for the value you've brought to today's show. There's some great insights and takeaways. I've been fiercely taking notes from our discussion today. There's no doubt about it. I'd love to welcome you on the show again, and I wish you every success. And thank you again for your contribution.
No, thank you, Ross. Thank you so much for inviting me. And this has been a great opportunity to share some of the leadership trait with you. So anytime, I'm happy to be part of the podcast again. So thank you.
Fantastic. It was our absolute pleasure.
You've been listening to the Global Tech Leaders Podcast, designed for both established and aspiring career-focused tech rock stars, as well as helping leadership figure out how to speak global in today's multicultural world. For further details, check out sf-talent.com.